there's so much to unpack, and you almost don't even know where to start. So I'm just going to kind of step back, and there's some headlines that are so hot off the press: the Oracle alliance with OpenAI, OpenAI's alliance with Microsoft, and therefore LinkedIn. But I'm sure there's some thoughts on that kind of love triangle. That's going to be interesting to have it unravel. As I look at these headlines, I see kind of a sort of a couple of kind of themes. I mean, obviously, we're in a state of utter disruption. I mean, and Frank, this might even make the disruption we lived through in the late 90s look small. It wasn't. We were there. It was epic. And it had some of the same dynamics. But this one, I just see just everywhere you look, there's disruption. And there's also, I don't know how else to say this, but it seems like a lack of understanding what to do. Uh, in the late 90s, I remember very clearly knowing exactly what we needed to do. We needed to execute. Execution was everything. We had to hire a whole bunch of people to do Y2K remediation or e-commerce platforming or client server still conversions were still happening. It was very clear what the mission was. Today, I'm less clear, I would love to hear some thoughts from you guys. Start raising hands anytime you want in this call. It's your call. Let's have an engaging, rip from the headlines segment. But if I look at this, we have the legal framework starting to come in. For those of you that might be interested in that, we've got another lawsuit coming, and I'm sure it's the first of many, and we're going to talk about those discreetly. And I think we need that. I think we need to have some legal guidance on what this AI stuff is all about as it relates to hiring practices and potential bias concerns. And we have, all kinds of challenges floating around Workday, which is interesting. Workday is all over the place. They just bought Paradox. We all know about that, and they seem impervious to the lawsuit that they are under with Mobley. They're just moving ahead. And in the meantime, there was a hacker problem that they had, and their data is exposed. So that makes it kind of even more concerning and perhaps relevant. And then we've got some concerns about whether this stuff is even delivering on its promise. There's a lot of job disruption, and there's a headline that's not in here as well, which we're going to have to unpack. The data problem that was mentioned last month and last cycle has come full roost. We now know there's 911,000 jobs that we somehow missed. And so we probably want to talk about, the integrity of the data that we're acting on. But we're clearly in, some kind of a hiring slowdown. That hiring slowdown does seem to be somehow connected to the disruption that we're in. And it's very unclear if the stuff is even doing what it was assigned to do. The MIT report, which we'll unpack a little bit. One of the things about disruption is it's hugely opportunistic. And whether it's Jeff Taylor and his great team over at Boomband, or whether it's OpenAI, or whether it's one of the incumbents, who knows where this is going to land. But it is going to be an interesting opportunity for those thought leaders and techies that can help us figure this out and chart a new path. So Frank, what I see here is a lot of disruption, a lot of chaos. Not the least of which is in the last 24, 48 hours. In general, an environment in business that is equally disruptive and chaotic, and a apparent lack of leadership to solve it all for us. And I think that's really a great segue to TA thought leadership. Can we have a role in making some sense of all this? And that's kind of what I'm seeing, Frank. How do you see it?
Yeah, totally agree. This is the right time for TA leadership, industry leadership, organizational leadership, stepping up outside of just the TA shell or transactional portion of the shell to be able to reach out and influence other parts of the business. We're definitely, this is the right time for that. If there's a slowdown, get busy, get active, introduce new processes, new tools, whatever the situation is, get busy. And this is the time for that. And there's so much news going on. I mean, this is just little clips that everyone should be aware of, and nothing rocket science here. But the only the tidbit that with some of this, like the Dayforce being acquired by a PE firm, $12 billion investment, they're going to have to return what, 15 to 20 billion dollars. Can a PE firm this come in and strip the organization down Will they somehow be able to grow and return that kind of value? Not so sure. Are we going to see a lot of Q4 investment that really hasn't happened the earlier part of this year? And what's the magic number of investment dry powder? Is it 3 trillion? Is it 4 trillion? Some people would say it's north of 5 trillion. It's amazing that there's so much dry powder. Are we going to see rapid investment in Q4? Otherwise, these firms, whether it's PE or VC or other investment vehicles, are they going to, the investor is going to ask for their money back because it hasn't been spent and it's just been sitting in some account. What are we going to see over the next few months is going to be really telling. But I do think this is a really terrific opportunity to get in and improve the TA processes, improve the people processes. That's what this all comes down to. How are we going to treat people, both inside and outside the organization? And then what other the new tools? I love what Boomband's trying to do. Let's see what changes they'll come up with. OpenAI is going to start up a job search tool. What are they going to do? Are they talking about it? Are they doing something really significant? Let's see. But that's just my 2 cents, and I'd love to hear from the group. And is there something new and exciting, or is there a different reaction or opinion? Would love to hear from the group.
Hey, I'll kick it off with
Please.
the announcement from OpenAI.
Yeah, man.
Because one, we should remember that when CEOs of AI companies are talking, they're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, warning other people off. We have to quit jumping like monkeys every time they say something. So let's just break down what OpenAI said. So they have a partnership, and people said, "Oh my God, they're going after Indeed." Well, they're partnering with Indeed and using Indeed's taxonomy, so it's hard for them to say they're going after Indeed. LinkedIn, as part of Microsoft, still owns 49% of OpenAI. And so before they go, oh, it's just shot at LinkedIn, keep that in mind. And not to mention, OpenAI has $10 billion in funding that they're required to go for profit by December 31st of this year, or they lose that out of SoftBank. So when they start announcing something that in 2026, they're going to launch a job board that's going to fight LinkedIn and Indeed, we need to be careful about that. They're talking about $10 billion in funding. They're signaling to other people. There's a lot that goes on with that. The most likely thing, if you actually read through their press releases, is they're trying to gather information on who is AI certified. Think of that number. We're going to have 10 million certified people by the end of 2026. That's a drop in the bucket. That's nothing. How is that even an announcement? That's embarrassing to throw a number out like that. So clearly that's a press release that impacts us. They're not going to create a job board, which is fascinating because if you think about it, OpenAI has a lot of information on everybody who uses it. All the LLMs do. They can know things like, do you know the basics of front-end development? Did you ask 12 basic questions? Well, guess what? You probably shouldn't have that job if you're asking the basics of HTML or CSS. You shouldn't be applying for the job. They have a lot of information that would be very powerful, but also massive discrimination claims, EEOC stuff. There's no way they could use that. It would be like me taking all of your phones and going through the last 24 hours and determining whether or not you should have the job. It might be useful. There's no way it can be used in the context of a job search. So it is fascinating. It's probably more data-driven. When you look at something like Mercer that just got, did they actually get bought or was that a rumor? They took all that money, that Mercer's supposed to be out there. They're working with OpenAI companies. But Mercer, the actual interview process is terrible when you go through it. They're data mining people to find out what's useful. That's what the AI companies are doing. They've run out of good data. They want to find all the good stuff we're using. So be careful saying, oh, OpenAI is going to launch a jobs board. That's people who have not been paying attention to the AI sector, doesn't know all the facts that I just dropped. None of those were real speculation. The real question is, how much does it really help us actually place people? So just tossing that one out.
Jim, where do you think this lands? I echo what you said, and it looks to me like the centerpiece, which has always been, in my view, the holy grail, is the matching itself. Like it is like cutting through all that fog of data and making sure, this has been a problem for us as candidates, as TA professionals forever. It's never been
You
solved.
bet.
and we get junk in our inbox. We all know the story of bad matching. And so is that seems to be the core tenet of what she said about what they're going to do. Am I misreading that? And
No,
second
that's
part, Jim,
exactly. They
where's
know
Mo?
how you work, but realize who's in charge of that. It's enterprise data. It's the same thing that Copilot's trying to do. The dream of dynamic CRM, Microsoft Dynamic CRM, why they bought LinkedIn in the first place. They want to continue to push their model. They want to know how you actually work as opposed to what I said in my resume or how you interview. So it's very valuable information for them because it can identify all kinds of information for reporting, for planning. It's very valuable information. It's not a jobs board. We are a drop in the bucket for those revenue wise, which is why Google tried it, Facebook, and because we're just not that important revenue wise. But the data we have is wildly important because it's how people live and work. And that's why they're doing it. And this is one of the reasons you ought to really be considering open source models in your own. If you're doing something for your company, that's going to be the next big thing. DeepSeek already dropped them, but a lot of people have your native ones. You'll be able to run a full LLM that has everything on your phone without giving it to a giant corporation that's going to use it to sell enterprise services. So that's the bigger push for most of us. But you're going to buy it from them because they're big. So that becomes the real question. Are you willing to give all of your data over? Well, we were arguing about disposition data for Indeed. Man, the stuff in your LLMs, if you knew what employees were doing, what they were dropping in those LLMs, every lawyer and cybersecurity person on the planet would freak out. Because probably you could probably guess all of your passwords and everything that you do just based on your phone and that information. So, and people are open to it. They're so excited that it's AI. So,
Is there a casualty in this? Is Indeed a casualty in this war? Does LinkedIn get a comeuppance? Where does this land?
this will be controversial, but Indeed's a casualty of their own success.
Okay.
Pay-per-click markets. I mean, they're following the exact same thing Google does. They start off very cheap and they're amazing. And the biggest issue with any pay-per-click market, any auction, is that you're only as good as your dumbest competitor. Now that everybody's on there, now that we have programmatic, Indeed can't grow. They're structurally not going to be able to add more people because there's already too many jobs that are on the platform. So now they're looking at collecting money. If you look at the changes, we were arguing about the XML stuff, a couple months ago, Deco's all about getting more money. They just had the Indeed FutureWorks thing. They're going to try to figure out different ways. They're going to charge candidates on their side from the assistants. They're going to charge us. It becomes a cash grab as fast as they can. They're cutting expenses, pushing for more money. That's all they're going to be focused on instead of the pie in the sky stuff that was under Himes. Now Deco's about how much can I make? And that's just a structural problem. At a certain point, they're just too expensive and they won't be to follow the quality. So, I mean, it'll be a decade. It's not going to be Thursday. It'll be a decade, but much like Monster and Builder, eventually they'll be replaced by something else. But that's not an AI question. The bigger AI question we have is if you guys are talking to small businesses and you're using them, the number of people, it's following what happened with social media, where people go, oh my God, I can put $500 to build a Facebook page and I'll make $1 million. And then it doesn't work. And then they get, oh, 95% of projects are failing. It's the same thing with AI. A lot of people are being exposed because they're just throwing a prompt in there. So the bigger danger is people, instead of using AI to do all the great things it can do, will start going, AI. And then they're going to be left behind. So a lot of this is structural and cultural and management failure. The tech, we've got to quit believing that tech will solve every problem. We all know this. For us, it's all about how individuals function, putting an individual to work. We've got to hold that tide back because the propaganda is through the roof, and now it's amplified by AI. So, sorry, that was a lot of stuff
That's a
to
key
unpack.
point. Propaganda is through the roof.
That's what I love to dig into with the TA folks that are on the call is what do we do about all this? Where do we land as professionals? I mean, that's what I'd love to see some hands go up and talk about. How do we prepare? What is coming? Can we get any line of sight into what early 2026 might look like? Is this an overreaction? I mean, this stuff looks like it's not working the way we'd hoped it would, but it's not stopping the big box tech companies from laying off tens and tens of thousands of people. And so, where do you guys think this lands for you as TA leaders, as TA professionals? Bill.
I think part of it, and Jim, you were starting to allude to it, is building these smaller LLMs that are customized, that actually have data in it that is candidate data, rec data, performance data, that we can now point this AI technology to that, so that way we can help our leaders hire better people and make sure that we've hired them, right? Because at the end of the day, retention is your best recruiting strategy, right? So if you hire the best person in the first place, that's really going to help, and it's going to help from in being able to identify quality, which is, I think, is a long-term play, right? You can't determine somebody's quality based on a manager said, yeah, I think I hired the right person. You need data that could go 3, 6, 9, 3 years, 5 years into the future. And that's where I think we can leverage, again, whether it's an SAP, if it's a Workday, those kinds of tools, to be able to get that information and provide that type of data and that type of AI capability to help our leaders make sure that we're hiring the right people there. So that's where I think it's going, is getting access to our information in TA and HR to be able to make smarter decisions and provide data and tell those stories that today is so hard to do.
Awesome.
I
Yeah,
like
Jeff,
that comment, Bill, around the organizational focus, constraining the small version, not a large language model, but a small one around the organization and that data. What can we do with that? What can we provide? I still wanted to build the report of saying, who hired this person that's the high performer that's been there 3 to 5 years in their role, and what school they go to and this and that, and build out all this great data. And we fall back to what was the best source. Let's go. There's so much internal. What learning did they have? All that you could generate if the LLM was focused on just your organizational people data. I like where you're going with that.
one of the things I liked about what you said, Bill, is the leadership component, the opportunity, the unprecedented opportunity for talent acquisition and HR to lead, to own this conversation. This is our data. These are our systems. These are talent acquisition. The first data point comes from talent acquisition, right? And then it goes all the way through to HR, but it's all HR data. It should be well within our domain, right in our crosshairs, and we should have maximum input and influence on how that data is used, what systems are implemented. And if we're not doing that, um, we're missing a huge opportunity. And I'll just, my pet peeve is I'm just not sure I'm seeing that yet at a macro scale. Like I don't see people stepping up, either whether it be TA leaders like ourselves or the broader defined HR community, and laying out a framework for us of what we should do and how we should react. And there's never been an opportunity like this for us to lead. It's our tech. We should be if we're not in the selection of it, if it's being selected for us, we've missed the trains leaving the station. If we're not architecting the ecosystem that talent acquisition lives in, then we've missed a golden opportunity to provide leadership to business. And one of the things I've always been troubled about HR owning TA and TA reporting into HR, forgive me for the HR leaders out there, is that we then are at the seat at their table, the seat at the HR table. And in many ways, this is a business discussion, right from the C-suite down to a talent acquisition, so we can action against the strategic goals. All right, and when you talk about data, obviously we've got a challenge in the general economy. It looks like we're stalled out, and it looks like the data is even getting worse. I'm sure you've all seen that we lost 911,000 jobs, Frank. I don't know where they went. Someone lost 911,000 jobs. And I mean, this is just not, I mean, confidence in that data is rattled. I'm not sure if other people have a take on that. And maybe that speaks volumes to what Bill just said, Frank, that we really need to be thinking small. And what you just said, thinking small about data instead of large. What's our own experience telling us? What is the data helping us to do? Are we building small scale LLMs that can actually inform how the business takes action? I don't know. I'd love to hear some thoughts
And
on that.
get more real data, get more organizational data without having to depend on all these others, and see where we can go with this. Whether you believe it or not, we know that there's some activity or slowdown, a lack of activity in the industry. We can see it. We know who's laying off and where, and it's just horrific to see. There are organizations that are growing. Are they in our radar? Are we seeing that? And they're probably smaller and not on our radar, but there are organizations that are working their business plans, and they are funded. Are they state-funded organizations? Are they on the Inc. 5000? So they're smaller and under our radar. Blair, you had a thought?
Yeah, just a question. Like, I know we have new leadership calculating, and is the new calculation maybe refining that number any better? And I just haven't had the time to go look and see if they're factoring things differently than they were 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Does anybody know?
Yeah. So the revision that they were looking at, you remember a lot of the jobs in the last few years have been from the immigrant population that's coming through. So it was an issue of the native workforce versus the immigration. That was the whole point, is every time the wages go, they open up the immigration pipelines, they have enough workers. And the concern is we don't have enough workers for the jobs that are out there. The way that the survey was done, when you're asking someone if they're unemployed or if they're working, was hitting a lot of those kinds of workers who don't count for the unemployment. They count as a W-2, but they don't count for the unemployment. So it was throwing off some aspect of that. That's one of the reasons the numbers were reviewed. It's why they waited over a week to push them out. So the question is, are we losing jobs? People actually losing jobs, or are they now not counting the massive immigrants that come in the last 3 years? And then that becomes the argument: do we need them to expand the economy? So the numbers are so thrown off. I mean, that's 1.5 million jobs in revisions that have disappeared in 3 years. So clearly the data was wrong, but what is the right way is not clear. I think the bigger issue is the number of unemployed in the youth. And there's a couple of issues there. They're saying it's AI. AI's stopping. I mean, the number of unemployed I've got a nephew and a niece, both with engineering degrees. One's selling phones at AT&T, one's taking the summer off. I mean, this is a real problem. These kids aren't being hired. Like the employment's reached over European levels for it. But there's something else. Is it AI? Is it general fear? Is it there's no managers left to train them? And this is the first generation that came after the pandemic, where they shut down schools. You were going to school, you were sitting in your dorm room doing a Zoom call with the professor. There was a tremendous impact from shutting down the country for all those times. And these kids not only do not have experience, they're terrified. They don't even speak well. So is it, because that's what we're hearing from hiring managers. Boy, these kids don't know how to interview. We've always heard that. They said that about us. They said about the millennials. But this might be the first time where it could be a mix of that. The cultural problems, the AI problems, the fear of the managers, the inability to add those. That's why the headlines are so terrifying, because we don't know. And it's probably all of the above, as opposed to here's the one answer and here's the one fix.
Exactly.
So
that's great. Great take. Great take. Shweta.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I actually, because I've been managing global talent acquisition for years, I spoke to 3 companies in the last 2, 3 weeks, and they've been laying off like 10,000, 15,000 people in US and moving their roles offshore or outsourcing. And I was like, do you guys have no rules? How can you just move people? And most of these organizations, they are healthcare organizations, they have no clue how offshore operates or how, outsourcing operates. And I was like, have you ever worked in that environment? Have you ever seen people from different countries doing your job? Do you understand those challenges? And does your leadership under those challenges? And they had no clue about it. So I think, I've been, researching a lot of organizations doing that in the last 2, 3 months, which I've been seeing, which is not great for the economy, because when you do not have jobs for your people, how can you look at outsourcing?
Right.
So
and they're still doing it. And
yeah, and they're still doing.
Yeah.
So
well, we're reinventing the wheel in that, and
Yeah.
it blows my mind, Shweta, that after all these years of offshoring, you'd think there'd be some expertise, and businesses still do the fire ready aim. Just move it. We'll figure it out later. Because
No,
costs are so
but
great.
yeah, that's crazy, that's what I've been I'm talking to all the forums. And coming to the interviewing part for 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 our people who just graduating. So I have started talking to two universities in our area and just helping students how to interview, how to show up their resumes and everything. And I think as TA, it's our responsibility to train our people who are just graduating to do better if the university doesn't have capabilities. So reach out to your college nearby, just ask them if you can coach these students. So I'm coaching MBA students, but you can always do that. As professionals, I think we should all help. Here they need help at this point of time. That's what I've seen with the students I've been coaching.
That's awesome. All
Excellent.
right.
Thank you.
Great input. Simon Evans, how are you, sir?
Doing good. Just real fast on the matter of the young workforce. I have two 20-year-olds as well. Thankfully, both working at the moment. But to my mind, this is a longer tale. It goes back to the crash in '08 because you had a whole population that were set for retirement that couldn't because their 401ks got decimated. So they stuck around and some of them still. Others eventually left, but were replaced by the Gen X, I guess, that were supposed to have moved in earlier. And it's just kind of creating this blockage that's going through the whole thing. And while I do agree, I think we've got a real problem with the impact of new technology, particularly AI and agents potentially eliminating the entry level white collar roles that a lot of new college grads typically would have gone into. I think it's also this is just a continuation of a mess that started in '08 and has never really got cleaned up.
Makes sense. We got the Workday thing. Andrew, do you want to say something about what we were talking about? Great to have you, by the way. We've been conversing on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and if you want, I'm happy to talk more about the Workday thing, given my background. But I think Simon's on to something that I've been talking to the press about, and we have generationally pushed. I have a daughter. Uh, my parents generationally pushed us into knowledge work, and that was seen as a level of success, and that was seen socially as different than manufacturing in the 40s and 50s, where there was social justice around. You have helped the United States recover from World War II, or you have invested in the build of World War II and the military and so on. And she asks me, what am I going to be able to do? And she legitimately doesn't know. And I told her, I said, all things being equal, you're going to have to be a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. and because people will still buy boats and they will still capsize them, and we're not going to have technology. Or if she wants to go into pediatrics, I said, you need to go into cardiac surgery, because insurance companies are not going to pay for robots to operate on children. And these dialogues aren't happening. Just like we've missed financial literacy for that generation, we are not having occupational literacy for that generation. And I think that as talent acquisition personnel, we might need to carry more of that responsibility publicly with our own employees and influencing them on the changing economics.
That's great. That's great. All right. All this adds up to TA leadership. Workday, always in the center of the spotlight. Not only are they facing looks like a certified collective action. Is that what it's called, Frank? A collective?
Yes.
A little different than a class action, right? Because you got to opt into it. But my understanding is that, aside from the data breach, which isn't a very good look, that collective action has been certified. We already know that. And the people are joining. Last reckoning, there's over 100 participants. And according to some legal scholars, it could be hundreds of thousands of plaintiffs here on this collective. Don't you think? I think Workday's got some challenges here. And it's odd to me. It's not odd, But it's interesting to me that they bought Paradox, right? And they're full steam ahead while we're getting sued for using the very same tech that we're now going all in on. And then maybe they don't have a choice. I guess they really don't have a choice. But I'm not sure if
And they
anyone has
have
any
to
thoughts on.
provide, information on, was it 1.2 billion or whatever people, how many hundreds of millions of people they've got to provide details for. I mean, it's just a huge amount of work. And the issue is the case law, right? I mean, we don't have case law in this space. We need to get some. So this is the start of that. And at the same time, hey, okay, they let people know that they were hacked, like organizations do, but what does it mean when they, check the box that yes, we've notified people in our proper channels that we've been hacked, but we're going to block that from being widely shared. And this is that bolded section that Jeff highlighted as the third bullet. This is, where Google and none of the search engines are really able to index that article or the comment about the breach, which, what are they really trying to do here? It just gives you that bad feeling when, they really were trying to protect themselves, but it makes you feel like they're trying to hide something, which may or may not be the case.
And just by the way, before I go to Simon's, Sirius XM and iSIMs are in a little tussle themselves. And it's kind of a little under the radar because I think Mobley's kind of the bell cow or the lead horse in this discussion, legal discussion. But what's interesting about that is Sirius is being sued. In this case, Mobley picked Workday, the platform provider, to sue. But if I'm understanding it correctly, Sirius themselves, as an iSIMS customer, um, is the one being sued. And that's kind of intriguing to me that the employer is the one on the hook, which I think ultimately it has to be. Simon.
Yeah, it's interesting to me at the same time that this is all bubbling up on the commercial side for Workday. They announced about, I guess, a few weeks ago that they are separating out their federal Workday practice and really defining that as a unique business. And from what I'm seeing and hearing, they're getting tremendous traction in the federal government as a solution, as the kind of default solution for the feds. And it's almost like, well,
Hmm.
if you go down that path far enough, does that benefit you with the current world that we're in with DOJ and stuff like that? But I don't want to go down conspiracy theory avenue here. But
Yeah.
it is interesting to me that at this time they really are making a massive push into the Fed space as a unique value proposition. And there's a whole ecosystem that is being built with vendors and partners around their federal competencies.
Could they be slammed right into place, which is what the Office of Personnel Management was trying to do? That got cut. So there'll be an official, probably year-long bidding process. And even if they still go with Workday, then it'll be another year before they implement it. And then there'll be another year before, we're into the next steps and all that. So these are multi-year processes that I think you got a lot of leaders that believe that, oh, it's software as a service. You can snap a finger and we just turn it on and we're good to go. It's taking longer, and they're smart to break out the federal practice. A lot of organizations will have a separate entity for legal, for separate legal entity for federal. Yeah.
By the way, all this conversation is swirling around this analysis here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is this stuff working? We've seen massive reductions in force and commitments to AI, and I'm sure the yield will be there and the ROI will eventually come home to roost. But thus far, not looking too good. It's looking like a lot of these implementations are not fulfilling, the expected outcome. And so I'm not sure how you guys feel about this and where we should, ultimately where we should stand. I mean, where should TA, I mean, we got to adopt, there's no choice but to be on the inside of AI, managing the deployment of it. But it's not working. Are you guys seeing it working in your worlds? Is it having quantifiable ROI where you've seen it implemented?
I think the operative answer to your question, David, is that we're not measuring, what kind of improvements may be coming from this. Whether it's the quality of the candidates, however you measure that, whether it's quality of hire or how quickly they get to productive status or productivity. I don't think we've taken the time to measure how technology is improving our workflows or the services that we're providing to our client, whether you define the client as our hiring managers, the business, or the candidates. And so I don't know that anybody knows how to answer that question because you can't prove it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great call out. And in many ways, we're living in somewhat of a state of fear of it. And
Yes.
maybe you don't want to speak out. Like I get nervous every time I put something poking the bear out on LinkedIn. Like I'm never going to get a job with these people. Like Meta's never going to hire me. I guarantee you that. 'Cause I'm not a fan. I don't like what they're doing. I think they lack moral compass. I don't think they know what they're. I think that's what you're saying. They don't know what they're doing because if we can't measure it, they can't measure it. And if I listen to these guys and they're in the White House and stuff, I get really like squeamish about it. Where's TA? Why wasn't TA in the White House?
And I was just jotting some notes down from what you're saying earlier that ties directly into this, which is you asked the question, what do we as thought leaders, as TA thought leaders need to do about this? What can we do about it? And I think therein lies, one of the issues too, is we need the courage to challenge the BS that's being put in front of us. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be, smarter than those providers of AI tools, but we need to ask the questions, and whether it's a candidate. I mean, I can see now where, one of the biggest things that's keeping us up at night is, am I hiring a fake candidate or am I hiring a real candidate?
Yeah.
And what tools do we have in place to do that? I don't want to see us go back to those days of having to background check every part of that person's experience, but I can see that coming, where that makes a resurgence, as well into our workflows.
Right.
But the old adage of trust but verify seems to be
Yeah.
one of those things that we really need to be concerned about right now.
Opportunity to lead. Lori.
Yes. Hi, David. Just to comment on what you asked, I'm in the DC Baltimore area and I have been interviewing. I'm unemployed, formerly a director of TA operations. Not once in my set of interviews has AI been asked to me. Now, again, I'm in the DC Baltimore area. I just don't think companies are there. I had a second interview last week for a medium sized construction company, and they don't even have a handle on their ATS system or reporting, yet alone AI. So, I'm trying to stay on top of AI, but what I'm seeing from small to mid-sized businesses, at least in my market, that's far, AI is just so far away from where the TA function actually is. And then ironically enough, this position reports into the director of HR. So you go back to HR owning it and controlling it. And how do we, get in there as TA leaders to have a voice on AI and so forth? So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm at least seeing in my market right now.
That's a good point. It is early. We tend to gravitate to the big headline like this one right here, Meta. It just may be so unclear yet what the ROI even is going to be. It doesn't stop them from laying off lots of people. And maybe for call center and stuff like that, we're already there. Maybe there's some applications where the stack is ready to roll. Brent, quickly, we've got a couple minutes left.
Sure, yeah, I'll keep it brief. So I'm at GitHub as a contractor right now, and they're owned by Microsoft, and so their big product push is AI technologies and engineering, and so I interview a lot of the salespeople and recruit a lot of those people too, and so like I hear some of the stories of good examples of where it is demonstrating value. So there's a lot of cases that are being built. It's just very early stages, and they're still kind of gathering the data, like Aaron was saying. But like right now as a team, a TA team, we're actually working on a project. I just looked up the questions or the prompts that I shared with my colleague who's putting it all together. But we're using AI for various things. Like I use it personally with just some of my managers to influence and help advise with data and strategy, better prepare our candidates for the interviews. I basically use it to look at the debrief notes to see where Most of the candidates are getting rejected, so we can help prepare our candidates better for that. So there's all these sorts of individual stories, like analyzing resumes for certain skills that are hard to recognize the difference between a machine learning engineer versus like a full stack software engineer that focuses in machine learning. So there's all different things you can use it for. I find personal value from to make myself more efficient.
That's got a great call out, and that is, I think, Bill, I'll go to you just for closing comments. That is, I think, the lesson is you're on the inside, Brent, and you're driving the conversation internally. You're leveraging the technology to have a conversation with senior management about the technology. So if you're an SME about the AI stuff that might be threatening to us a little bit, that's a much stronger position than just hand wringing and pearl clutching, which I like to do a lot. Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I think the prevailing wisdom within HR is they're scared shitless of AI,
Yeah,
right?
simple as that.
And we used AI in my last organization. It really was about the automation. It was about scheduling and those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, it was like, all right, Bill, what are you going to do with that extra time and that extra money? Right. And in some cases, well, I don't need I don't need the headcount. I don't need the budget. Now I'm giving something back. Right. So it's not a return on investment, it's actually giving something back. But I think the prevailing wisdom when I was talking to those leaders is they're afraid of it, because it may mean that we don't need as big of a team or as big of a budget to get the work done. So I think that that's some of that hesitation may be happening, especially from an HR perspective, because it impacts their role, their people, their teams, and their budget at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for dialing in.